Thank you for joining us. We're about to do a strategy session here on Twitter. I'm going to take the top 3 to 5 questions, whatever we can get done on the break, go through them, and yeah. So over on Twitter, @Polk Poker. Let's go ahead and kick it off here. So we'll see who was the first person that tweeted in. So this one's from Josh Marlowe. When you put your opponent on a certain range of hands, how do you come up with that? Well, you start off with every single step in the hand that was taken. What did they do pre-flop? Now you have a good idea of that general range. What did they do on the flop? Now you have a good idea of that general range. What do they do on the turn? And you start to slowly narrow things down. You want to make sure to include hands that are kind of unlikely, but not super unlikely, but understand that they're going to happen less often. Like if someone flats my open, I wouldn't say they never have aces, but I would say they very rarely have aces. That way, when you get to the river, you can think of what they would always have and what hands they might occasionally but rarely have. For example, if you open someone calls in the big blind, they're always going to have hands like Jack 8 suited, hands that are definitely getting the odds pre-flop, but they're rarely going to have hands like aces or kings or 8-3 off. So each street, do a full assessment, come to some conclusions, and then move on to the next street. Post-flop, if they didn't raise the flop, they're less likely to have good hands, but still possible. But they're more likely going to have a hand like a draw or a pair. So that's the way I would look at things. Good question, though. Okay. NDT start the hand with 26 big blinds. The button opens 3x. You have 4s in the small blind. Jam or call 3 from the money. Tough spot, Nate Spades. That is a tough spot. It depends how big the field is. In a big field tournament, I'm folding because you're so likely to cash and jamming really kills your ICM. If it's a very small tournament, I could see jamming being okay. That said, you're probably going to have to fold because of the ICM pressure. It's important to understand how ICM plays a role in your decisions. Generally speaking, I would jam, I think, but in this spot specifically, I would fold. Jackson says, what's the worst hand you think of for value in PLO, big blind versus button, 3.5x against an unknown? You know, PLO is so complex that I don't really want to say worst like that. It's not linear in that same way. You're going to want to 3-bet some hands like double-suited rundowns and some hands like middling kings and good queens. Even though bad aces have the best equity of any of those hands, I'd probably flat some of my worst ace-ace hands because it plays so badly post-flop. So I wouldn't look at it quite like that. I'd map a little more around playability. Good question, though, but not really my area of expertise. David D. Rienzo, by the way, played a little CS with you, I think. Appropriate bankroll management strategy for 500 NL live cash games. Always wondered how people lose so much to those trash players. It's like this. I think if you're a strong player and you've been there before, I think you can get by on 10 or 12.5K. I generally recommend 15 or 20K, especially if you're going to play in a game that can get deep, especially if you're going to play in a game people can buy in for 1K. But if you're playing like a Bellagio 2-5 where 500 is the max buy-in, I wouldn't mind seeing something around like 10, 12.5, 15K. The thing is, if you drop under 10, I'd be pretty quick to move down to 1-2. Those games are very soft, and you should be able to work your way back up. Okay, tweet at me. Okay, how I let a girl like Katie at me. Ha ha ha. Not going to happen, bro. And loving the YouTube vids. Can you recommend some poker math reads, action consequences books? I had to think like you. The only good, like really good poker book I've ever read was Applications of No Limit Hold'em. Other than that, most of the books have been kind of questionable, so I don't really want to recommend anything. 2+2's books tend to be the most solid of anyone's out there, but the problem with a lot of those books is they become outdated quickly. Those are my thoughts. Anyway, thank you for joining me for the Strat Sesh, guys. Hope you guys got some good answers to those questions.